The seam was 7 centimeters long, and I had been running my thumb along it every 30 minutes since the bay doors sealed. Not because I was nervous, because that was the job. You check a weld under load stress every 30 minutes, you log the temperature differential, and you note any lateral creep in the bead. That's structural damage control. That's what I was there to do. The fact that the load stress in question was a Category 9 corrosive atmospheric surge eating through the outer hull of a Vethani transit collective waystation, and that the rated tolerance on that particular weld was 6 hours, and that we were currently at hour 2, none of that changed the procedure. Siloth Varn, the senior Vethani station engineer, had been watching me from the moment I started. He was 3 meters tall with the pale ridged skull and 4-jointed fingers that all the Vethani engineers had, and he held a tablet in 2 of his hands and a stylus in the 3rd. He had not written anything in 40 minutes. "You are aware," he said, "of the rated tolerance for that bulkhead seal." 6 hours, I said. "Yes. We are at 2 hours and 14 minutes. I know." "Then you are checking the seam to confirm that it is performing within expected parameters." I straightened up and looked at him. "Checking it, so I know the exact moment it starts to fail, and so I can decide what to do about it." He wrote something on the tablet. I did not ask what. The other Vethani engineer, a younger one named Tuvashrel, seated against the far wall with his knees folded up, and his 4-fingered hands wrapped around a cylinder of warmed fluid. He had not spoken since hour 1. Outside the reinforced viewport, the surge was visible as a greenish-yellow particulate haze pressing against the station's outer skin, chemical pressure dissolving the rated polymer coatings layer by layer at a pace that the Vethani maintenance literature described as controlled, and I would have described as relentless. The outer hull was holding. Question was what happened at the secondary seal between the hull and the interior bulkhead, specifically at the weld seam along the lower left edge of the bay's interior pressure door, where 2 different alloys had been joined 11 years ago by a Vethani fabrication crew and had not been load tested above standard atmospheric pressure since. That was my seam. 7 centimeters of fused metal. That was the only reason the bay would remain sealed if the outer hull lost integrity. My thumb on it at hour 3, still cool, bead intact, no lateral creep. I wrote it in my log and set a timer for 30 minutes. "The outer composite is at 61% rated integrity," Siloth Varn said, reading from his instruments. He had resumed writing at some point. "The degradation rate suggests outer hull breach at approximately 4 hours and 44 minutes. "That matches my estimate," I said. "Then the interior bulkhead will be exposed to direct surge contact at 4 hours 40. He paused. "The rated tolerance on the interior seal is 6 hours from initial surge contact. At that point, we will have approximately 1 hour and 20 minutes of interior seal integrity remaining. If the degradation rate holds constant." The degradation rate has held constant for the past 2 hours and 12 minutes. I didn't answer that. The math was the math. If the outer hull breached at 4:40 and the interior seal had 6 rated hours from initial contact, we were looking at a theoretical clearance window of 1 hour 20 minutes, assuming the surge cleared before hour 10 from initial contact. The Vethani meteorological models said the surge would pass in 8 to 9 hours from initial contact. That left us a margin of between -1 hour and +1 hour, depending on which end of the meteorological estimate held. That was the math. I wrote it in my log and set my timer for 30 minutes. At hour 4, I checked the seam. Still cool. At hour 4:40, something shifted in the sound of the bay. Not a breach, not yet, but a change in the frequency of the ambient vibration in the walls. Siloth Varn noted it simultaneously. Outer hull integrity below threshold. Interior bulkhead now in direct surge contact. Timer begins. He wrote something. I checked the seam. Still cool. Still intact. No creep in the bead. Rush. Set down his cylinder and looked at his own instruments for the first time in 2 hours. Interior seal rated tolerance engagement confirmed, he said quietly. 6 hours from this mark. I set my timer. At hour 5, I checked the seam. The bead was warm. Not hot, not critically elevated, but measurably warmer than ambient by about 4 degrees. I noted the temperature differential in my log, noted the time, noted that the bead itself showed no visible lateral creep. I set my timer for 30 minutes. Varn had stopped talking. He was writing continuously now, and I recognized what he was doing because I had seen it once before. At a pressure incident on a joint survey vessel 2 years ago, he was filing disposition notifications. Not distress signals, those had gone out automatically at hour 1. These were internal record documents, the kind of thing Vethani station administrators generated when a compartment was categorically expected not to survive. He was declaring the bay lost. Tuvashrel was watching him do it. I checked the seam at hour 5:30. Warm, stable, no creep. I wrote it down. There is no mechanism, Varn said, without looking up from his tablet, by which an 11-year-old fabrication weld of this specification is expected to hold beyond rated tolerance under active surge contact. No, I said. The Vethani fabrication standards document does not recognize a performance buffer above rated tolerance for this class of joint. I know. Then you understand that continuing to check the seam provides no actionable information. I looked at him. It tells me whether it's holding, which will not change the rated tolerance. No, I said. It won't. I set my timer. At hour 6, the rated tolerance limit from initial interior contact, I put my thumb on the seam and held it there for a count of 10. Warm. Still no creep. The bead surface was oxidizing slightly at the upper edge, the way old welds do under thermal stress. The structural bond was intact. I could feel it the way you can feel a good weld. Not flexible, not brittle, just solid. The way metal feels when it has decided to keep being metal. I wrote, hour 6. Temp differential 6 degrees Celsius ambient. Bed integrity nominal. No lateral creep. Tolerance limit passed. Varn looked at his tablet. He had stopped writing. The rated tolerance has elapsed, he said. Yes. He looked at me. You are still checking the seam. Yes. He did not write anything. He stood very still for a long moment, his 3 occupied hands holding the tablet and stylus. And then he put the stylus down on the equipment rack beside him, and did not pick it up again. At hour 6:30 I checked the seam, still holding. At hour 7 still holding. Temperature differential had stabilized at +7, and stopped climbing. Tuvashrel got up and came to stand beside me, without speaking. He looked at where my thumb was on the bead. He looked at my log. He sat down again. At hour 7:30 I checked the seam. At hour 7:53, the Vethani Meteorological Alert revised its surge clearance estimate to 8 hours and 11 minutes from initial contact. That was 7 minutes away. At hour 8 I checked the seam. The bead was warm, no creep. The differential had dropped back to +5 degrees, which meant the surge was thinning. At hour 8:11 the all-clear tone sounded. 3 low pulses that I had never heard in anything other than a drill, and which sounded exactly as unremarkable as a drill. The surge had cleared. The outer hull's remaining integrity was 23% of rated, degraded, due for replacement, but intact. The interior seal was intact. The bay was intact. The bay door opened 14 minutes later after the external atmosphere checked clean. Varn filed a retraction of the disposition notifications he had submitted at hour 5. I saw him do it. He did not look at me while he did it, and I did not say anything about it, because there was nothing to say. He had done what his training and his standards documentation told him to do. The math had been the math. The station administrator met us at the door. He was looking at Varn's terminal reports, which showed the disposition filings and the subsequent retraction, and then he looked at my log, which showed 30-minute seam checks from hour 0 to hour 8. 16 entries, each one with a temperature reading and a bead condition note. He looked at me for a long moment. You checked it every 30 minutes, he said. Past the rated tolerance. Yes. Why? Picked up my kit and slung it over my shoulder. Because it was still holding, I said. And I wanted to know the exact moment it stopped. He looked at the log again. He did not have anything else to say. I went back to the seam one more time before I left the bay. Put my thumb on it. Still warm. Still solid, still no creep in the bead. The oxidation at the upper edge had settled into a faint discoloration. Color old welds go when they have been through something and come out the other side. I wrote the final entry. Hour 8:25. Clearance confirmed. Bead intact. Temp differential returning to ambient. Then I closed the log and walked out.